Nicolas Jaar's catalog of work kind of feels like momentary flashes of different parts of the world, just traveling in mere seconds. First of all, he applies aspects of his French-Chilean heritage in the flavor of his beats, in the snippets of spoken word, and by singing in either language, and in his lyrical concepts. And considering the way he can stand up intricate, jagged-edge texture with composure, it can kind of feel like sightseeing, just taking in architectural grandeur with entire worlds behind its construction. But then again, on Space's Only Noise, he suggested how exquisite even the most mundane of areas can feel by piecing together sediments of a campground terrain, then pouring water through their cracks to tickle your ear, and laying these pianos over top of it with a graceful dance. And he has made material with a more immediate, beat-driven impetus. Club Capital is a great example, or the elastic grooves on the ever-evolving masses on Sirens, or the airtight house under the AAL name, which 2017 to 2019 kicked things up another notch by wreaking havoc inside an industrial furnace. There are points on Pomegranates with this ghastly urgency too, but their emotional effect feels more like a subtle pressure. It clenches your lungs and makes your chest burn and your mouth dry. It's not so much vigorously gushing out of you, but he can do both, which Killing Time is a perfect example of. It sounds like a stained glass window and wine glasses in a crowded ballroom reception, all shattering into shards. And then these stark pianos rise out of the aftermath and spread this pensive woe into the air over what just went down. They kind of remind me of performances on tracks like Divorce, which sound improvised from a similar setting after closing hours. And the loops on Survival and Pass the Time seem to harden the world into steel as they unwind, and Nico's vocal deliveries are never obtrusive, they're solely a tool for hypnosis. On Space's Only Noise, they droop lethargically and spill out into a puddle, while on many of the tracks chosen for nymphs, they're evaporated into their upper registers. And I would say that this project, Cenizas, is the most weary, scraggly of any other full-length under the Jarr name, and the artist statement on his website reveals that it's a product of him wriggling his way out of human civilization, trying to be free and eradicate thoughts of temptation, but new problems arose, of course, because through your eyes, the only thing to indicate you're alive is other people. His brain started to trail off course, and one day he noticed it laying over in the mud getting soggy. And the record's sound palette is skin and bones. It can sound like a fox starving out in the wilderness, like on Agosto, where it's surrounded by twittering bugs as well. And the instruments either have more than enough timbre in their naked state, like the blaring reed on Rubble sounds like a caw from an agonized crow, or they hardly have tone but do have physical effect. And if your head is utterly blank, you could see yourself in them, and they'll help make you certain you're alive, because all you know is your corporeal form with a life like this. Sometimes that comes in operational sounds, like the minute peeps on Garden, but Rubble, for example, has a much more severe impact. It straight sounds like rocks are breaking off of a cliff and tumbling on top of you in a wave as fluid as the ocean. And the percussive blocks on Goche sound like a tongue being clicked against the roof of a mouth, or knuckles being cracked, and then the strands of keys and bass later on in the track prick more finely into the skin. Sometimes the texture can feel like a handful of crumbly, granular soil being shoved into you, like on Sunder or Menaced. And I think that track is focused on this contrast between something earthly and something sterile as metal, which undergoes being forcibly twisted as if it's somehow more flexible than it is, being lubricated, then squeaking as loud as shoes on a gym floor, and being sharpened. But what makes all that hands-on sound play emotionally fulfilling is that sickly coil that falls out of it. Plus, in general, the ambiance on this record has a nauseating weight on you, as if said metals were melted by the sun's heat, then poured over your brain, like on Vanish, which also kind of gives me the sensation I'm sitting in the green contents of a witch's cauldron. Xerox's arrangement sounds both claustrophobic and dilapidated, with sounds that creak loosely like a rusted weather vane or a bench swing, and it sounds so wretched that its meditative chants feel like they're forcing you into purgatory rather than any sort of repose. Mud is this active ritual to the sun performed by a prehistoric civilization. Goche's bass keys sound like they're being performed by the altar of a deserted church. They sag down and pull you into a lull. And much of the record is shrouded in dust buildup from a ventilator or a vacuum or dead flakes of skin. On Agosto, that flounders about helplessly until it gets so worked up, it's almost completely deadened without explanation. And because the light vapor and drones it does leave behind are near silent, they arouse an even greater ache in the chest. The title track is blotted in ash, it's disorienting, but then the twinkles through it almost feel like a spell is being cast and illuminating it, Or it's like you're delusionally wandering through a forest at night, hoping to arrive at some wonder you can't find in the rest of the world. And the whole second phase of Hello Chain is like this full body baptism. It totally lifts you up, and it's almost uncanny finding it in a record like this. Then the record uses instruments that are durable and have some amount of light to them, although it's dim, but they have more influence than you would realize. Like, they turn the entire tone of Mud on its head at the end, and the loop all the way through Sunder gives its waste-ridden backdrop a certain beauty. Plus, the chanting on this track almost feels like giving the nothingness within you form, clenching it, seizing power through it, and its lyrics suggest that if you're conscious, you need to carry some extent of numbness or acceptance to be still, to survive. It almost feels like those days where you feel like you can skew it to your benefit, or you're cheating the system through it. Faith Made of Silk's percussion pretty much hogs all of its attention, and while you might not expect that to work because it doesn't have that much timbre, it does just in its heft, the way it lumbers and gets a little disheveled, and this line on it suggests that the universe will always be throwing curveballs at you, so your only real chance at a sense of stability is to embed it into yourself. And I can't help but wonder if the track hastily becomes this ball of adrenaline at the end, then cuts off to suggest exactly what you shouldn't do. Just obsessively chase some unattainable peak that you're like subconsciously expecting to fix you, and then end up left with nothing.